အားလုံးပဲမင်္ဂလာနာနဲ့ခင်ဗျာခင်ဗျာ CR Media ကနေပြန်လဲကြိုဆိုလိုက်ပါတယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်ဒီတစ်ခါတင်ဆက်ပေးမယ့်အကြောင်းအရာလေးကတော့မြန်မာပြည်ကိုအင်တာဗျူးသွားတယ် Clarissa ရဲ့အင်တာဗျူးအပိုင်း1ကနေအနည်းထိဒီဗီဒီယိုဖိုင်ထဲမှာတင်ပြထားတာဖြစ်ပါတယ်ဒီဗီဒီယိုဖိုင်လေးကိုစနေဆုံးထိကြည့်ပေးဖို့လည်းဖိတ်ခေါ်ချင်ပါတယ်အားလုံးပဲကြည့်ပေးပါမယ်ပြီးရင်ထုံးစံတိုင်းကျွန်တော်ရဲ့ channel လေးကို subscribe နဲ့ follow လေးလုပ်ပြီးတော့ဖို့လည်းအထူးပဲမေတ္တာရပ်ခံပါတယ်
Protests continue. They did throughout the weekend, which security officials have been responding to with this brutal crackdown, detaining thousands. At least 11 people were arrested Friday, minutes after being interviewed by CNN. Our Clarissa joins us now live from Myanmar with the permission of the military, who we do want to note is escorting our team. So, Clarissa, what's happening now? Tell us why it's so important for you to be there.
Well, as you said, John, 2 months ago, a democratically elected government was overthrown by the military in a coup after the military suffered what can only be described as a humiliating defeat in the elections back in November. That coup has given rise to an enormous protest movement that has swelled across the country. Put simply, the military does not have the support of the people of Myanmar. And as those protests have swelled and people have become more angered about this coup, so too has the violent oppression of that protest movement by the military. As you said, hundreds have been killed, among them dozens of children. We wanted to come here to report on the ground because, simply put, John, no other journalists, international journalists, have been allowed into Myanmar since this coup happened. Now, we came with permission from the military, with all of the complications that entails, but we still felt that it was of vital importance to come here ourselves, to see what was happening, and to confront the people responsible for the violence.
And so, Clarissa, I mean, I know all of this is delicate, but since you're under the auspices of the military, are you able to report freely?
We had been assured prior to coming here that we would have independence and freedom of movement. We wanted to stay in a hotel in Yangon. That was not allowed. We're staying instead in this military compound. It's completely walled off. We cannot come in and out and move freely. On our first day, we were moving around with a convoy of 6 trucks full of soldiers. In addition to that, we have many minders following our every move. Whenever we do have the opportunity to be on the street, which is very rarely, Allison, our minders are constantly filming everything with their cell phones, making notes, making phone calls, taking records of every single person we talk to and every single movement we make. So it has not been without its challenges, Allison.
Well, they're taking pictures and they're taking names, apparently, Clarissa. So tell us about the people who've been detained after speaking with you.
So this was a very distressing incident, John. On one day, we were finally allowed to go to a public space, to an open market. And it's important to underscore here that we have not solicited contact with any activists, with anyone who's part of the protest movement, because we know, given the context that we're here in, just how dangerous that could be. However, when we took our cameras out in this market and started shooting video, people started coming up to us. People started giving the 3-fingered Hunger Games salute that has become the emblem, the symbol of this defiant movement. And they came up and started telling us their stories. They told us they were frightened. They told us there is no peace there. And we let them say their piece. We felt it was important to give them the opportunity to have their side of the story on the record. Shortly afterwards, however, we found out that many of them were detained. One woman actually ran after me while we were still at the market, trembling like a leaf, on the phone with someone who said that 3 people we'd spoken to had already been arrested. We had the opportunity, however, to sit down with Myanmar's senior military leadership, the government spokesman himself, and we asked him why on earth these people had been arrested, and we urged him to release them. Take a listen. We went to a market in Yangon, and a lot of people approached us because they wanted to talk to us. They wanted to tell their side of the story. We subsequently found out that at least 5 of them were arrested. We have verified this independently. We have seen photographic evidence in some cases to confirm this. can you please explain why you would be arresting people for talking to us? What possible crime did these people commit?
They haven't committed any crime. We saw it on the news yesterday, and I asked how many were arrested. 11 got arrested. The security forces were worried that they would provoke others and start the protest in the market, and that is why they got arrested. However, the government is arranging to release them as soon as possible.
We are now very relieved to be able to confirm that at least 8 of those 11 people, and all 8 that CNN knew about, have now been released. And that is really, truly great news. But still, this just gives you such an idea of the situation that these people are confronting here. They can't even say on camera that they're frightened, that they want a better future, that they want democracy without being arrested. That's how threatened the military is by these people and by this enormously popular protest movement. John, Allison.
So Clarissa, why does the military want you there, or why have they agreed to allow CNN to be there if they're just going to arrest everybody that you talk to?
The military wants to get its side of the story on the record, too, and that's important, and we gave them the opportunity to do that. They see the protest movement as being violent, as being dangerous, as being disruptive to the economy. They say that if people allow the process to play out, that there will be elections again within the next 2 years. They paraded a series of victims before us who told us stories about being threatened by the protesters, humiliated by the protesters. They took us to buildings that they said had been vandalized by the protesters. But when it comes to the idea of this 2-year process before which there will be elections, you can understand why very few people here have any faith in that. There were democratically held elections back in November. There were independent observers who attended those elections who did not make note of any egregious fraud or anything of that nature. And yet still the military intercepted and this coup took place. So very few people here actually believe them when they say that there will be another chance at elections. And after more than half a century of repressive military rule, simply put, they're not willing to give up. They're not willing to let go of the hard-won freedoms that they have enjoyed in the last decade.
Clarissa, do you have a sense if the military regime, their power is coalescing or growing at this point? Where is it on the curve as you look towards these elections, 2 years from now?
From what we've seen on the ground, the military does not have anything in the way of strong support from the people. What they do have is sophisticated weaponry. What they do have is a large fighting force. There is no comparison in the scale of what you're seeing from the protesters versus what you're seeing from the military in terms of armaments, in terms of funding. And so the military does have that on its side, and it may well be that brute force wins the day here. What's very concerning to so many people, including the United Nations, who've warned that this could turn into a bloodbath, is that as the protesters become more incensed, as the protest movement becomes more violent, this country could be on course for real civil strife, and nobody wants to see that happen.
Clarissa Ward, we are lucky to have you there. The world is lucky to have you there. So we get a window as to what is happening. Please stay safe, you and your team. Thank you for being.
ကမ္ဘာစစ်သတင်းဌာနအကြီးဆုံးမီဒီယာဖြစ်တဲ့ CNN Clarissa
At least 11 people who spoke to CNN just minutes before getting arrested. Protests across the country started after the military overthrew the elected government in February. And since then, one advocacy group says more than 500 people have been killed, including children. The military cut off internet access, and no international journalist has been allowed into the country until now. CNN's Clarissa Ward is live for us in Myanmar with the permission of the military. They're escorting the team on the ground. Clarissa, explain why it's so important that you're there.
Well, Jake, I want to underscore that no independent international journalists have been allowed into this country in the last 2 months since that bloody coup took place. As you said, rights groups saying more than 550 people killed. This is a massive protest movement that really came about after the military ousted Myanmar's democratically elected government, the people coming out into the streets in the millions. And the more they protested and the more animated those protests became, the more the military tried to suppress them. The military here really does not have the popular support of the people of Myanmar. So we felt it was essential, even though it is a difficult situation when you are in a country with the permission of in this case, the military, the main oppressors in this situation, we felt it was very important to be on the ground, to see for ourselves whatever we could, and to tell the story of the people of Myanmar, Jake.
And what's it been like to report there? Have you had the freedom to report whatever you want to report?
So we've had the freedom to report what we want to report. As you can tell right now, we're going live to you from here in Myanmar. We are, though, very controlled in terms of how we can move around, who we can talk to. I'm here in a military compound. We wanted to stay in a hotel, and we were told simply that that was not possible. Every single place we go to, we go with a huge amount of security. We have minders following our every move. They're constantly filming on their iPhones every conversation we have. And those conversations, by the way, are really limited because we haven't had a huge amount of access to ordinary people from Myanmar. And I just want to give you a little bit of a sense, if I can get this clip up, of what it's like trying to report here. Take a look. What's this poster here? We see "We support CRPH."
Okay.
With the 3-finger salute.
Okay.
That's from people who are against the military. Is that saying that the people in this area are against the military?
Yeah. Maybe not sure, because some demonstrators go around the Yangon and shouted demonstration.
Can we maybe talk to some of the people? Can we ask them?
Not sure, because this country is security. I'm not sure, because I just for interpretation. Your samples. Okay.
I'm wondering, there's some people over there. Maybe we could go and talk to them.
Oh, okay. So the security forces told me we shouldn't stay for a long time here for our security.
For our security.
Yes.
Gives you a sense of the intense level of security with us. 1, 2, 3. Another 3 over there. 6 trucks full of soldiers accompanying our every move. And I talked there about that 3-finger salute, the so-called Hunger Games salute. This gesture has become the symbol, really, of resistance against the military coup. And even when we were out on the streets with all that military people around us, with all those minders around us, people would come up at any available opportunity and flash that salute at our camera. They want the world to know what they are going through, and they want more people out there telling their story, Jake.
Clarissa, why would the military let you in?
Well, the military has its side of the story, too, and up until now, they've been largely tight-lipped about what that is. Essentially, what they want the world to know is that the protesters have become much more violent. The protesters are using Molotov cocktails. They're using slingshots, which, again, is no match for the assault rifles that the Myanmar military is using. But really, they're trying to cast the protest movement as a violent mob of anarchists that needs to be suppressed. They took us to a number of factories that had been burned down. They said that the protesters were responsible. The protesters say they were not responsible. But that's very much the narrative that they're hoping will take shape. The idea that somehow it's the protesters who are to blame for all the violence here. But when you're looking at the actual makeup of what's happening during these standoffs and these protests that are quickly turning into massacres, you can see that one side clearly has a huge advantage in terms of its arms, of its level of weaponry and funding, and there's simply no match, Jake.
And Clarissa, you sat down with a senior member of the military leadership there in Myanmar. No other journalist has been able to do that. What did you ask him?
Well, we had a lot of things to ask him, and it was a pretty uncomfortable interview, to be honest. So we wanted particularly to drill down on the number of innocent civilians who have been killed, more than 550 protesters, pro-democracy protesters, most of them unarmed, among them 44 children, Jake. That's according to the United Nations. So we really wanted to get some sense of how on earth the military could justify this. We went to him specifically at one point with a very specific piece of video that shows a young activist being killed in cold blood, to give him a sense to explain how on earth such a brutal killing could possibly be justified. Take a look. This is CCTV footage of 17-year-old Kwame La going past a police convoy. You can see the police shoot him on the spot. His autopsy later said that he suffered brain injury as a result of a cycling accident, which I think we can all see that's not a cycling accident. How do you explain this?
If that kind of thing occurred, we will have an investigation into it. We will investigate if the video is real or not. There may be some videos which look suspicious, but our forces do not have any intention to shoot innocent people. We will investigate if it's real or not.
We also pushed him hard on what the game plan is here. How can this violence possibly end, this awful cycle of violence? And when will the people get to have their voices heard? He said that the military's plan has always been to allow for another round of elections sometime in either the next year or possibly up to 2 years. But it's really important to underscore here, Jake, that nobody here on the ground really believes that, because the whole reason that this coup took place in the first place is that there were free and fair elections back in November. There were independent election monitors there who did not see any problems in terms of fraud or any significant problems. And that election was won in a landslide by the NLD party. The military's party suffered a humiliating defeat, and that's what precipitated this coup in the first place. So I think people are very unwilling to believe the idea that there will be another round of free and fair elections, and that their candidate, their choice, who is right now under arrest in prison, Aung San Suu Kyi, will be allowed to become president if she did indeed win again. Or, frankly, no one believes that she will be allowed to run again because she is facing these trumped-up charges, Jake.
And Clarissa, tell us about the people who talked to you and then were subsequently arrested.
You know, Jake, this is always your worst nightmare as a journalist, right? We finally were able to negotiate access to a public space, not a controversial space. It was a space that the military actually picked. But the minute we got to this market and were just shooting video of people going about their daily business, once they saw their cameras and they knew that CNN was in town and they had been writing a lot about it on social media, a lot of people came up to us. They flashed that three-finger Hunger Games salute I told you about. They talked about wanting justice. They talked about wanting democracy. They talked about wanting freedom. More than that, so many of them talked about how frightened they are, Jake. Soldiers coming into their neighborhoods every single night, dragging dead bodies away. And what we found out was that shortly after this trip to the market, at least 8 people, by CNN's count, were arrested for the simple crime of just having spoken to us and said that they were afraid. We pushed the general really hard on that. He admitted that 11 people in total were arrested. He said that they shouldn't have been arrested, to give him credit, and that they would be released. And we can now confirm that they have indeed been released, which is a huge relief for us. And also we are grateful to the military for releasing them.
And we should note, I mean, when people talk to you, or they flash you the Hunger Games salute, the three-fingered Hunger Games salute that I'm holding up right now, in solidarity with them, I should say. That's an act of civil disobedience at great risk. What other acts or forms of civil disobedience have you witnessed?
Well, this is just it. The military is trying to control the country through brute force, but what they can't do is make people work, for example. So there's a huge civil disobedience movement. Most of the country's workers are striking. They're not going to work, whether it's ministries, whether it's banks. You go by the banks here, there's long, long lines outside of every single bank. That means that the economy is grinding to a halt. There's garbage in the streets. It's very difficult for the military to kind of keep up with this charade that this is a functioning society now. As long as people refuse to work, as long as you don't have the support of your own populace, and let's be very clear here, we have seen absolutely no evidence that the military has any real popular support here in Myanmar. And as long as that continues, even if you are shooting at unarmed protesters, even if you are killing children, it becomes very difficult and challenging to actually run a country, Jake.
Yeah. Clarissa Ward in Myanmar for us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your courage.
Thank you.